Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. It feels like ages since I've made a YouTube film at all. It has been ages. I am so busy right now. It's kind of hard to put into words. I was just working in the other room and I thought it would be really fun to mount a camera and show you the kind of chaos and the kind of work schedule and pace that I have on a given day. I'm not saying it's healthy or wise, and I did manage to fall off my bike yesterday at a dead stop, couldn't unclip, and fell over, landed flat on my back. So the reason why I'm not moving my head right now is that basically my neck no longer functions. But over the past week or so, 10 days, I've given 2 hour-and-a-half talks, both to workshop programs, one in California, one here in New Mexico. And they're basically about Blurb, but I try not to talk about the nuts and bolts of Blurb because that's all stuff you can learn very easily. I try to talk about more printing in general, publishing in general, magazines, zines, trade books, photo books, etc., and sort of how I do it and how I look at it. And so the first part of the presentations are me giving you 8 suggestions and then showing a presentation that shows about 9 or 10 of the publications I've made. Some are very recent and some are old, but I think that they're all strategic, and that's what I want to do today. Prepare yourself. There will be color later in this film. I feel horrible about it. I'm not proud of it, but there will be color. I could do it in black and white, and I might if I change my mind, but just be aware. All right, so let me blow through this really quickly. The reason I get asked to do this all the time is obviously I work for Blurb. Workshop programs like Blurb, there's a million ways of utilizing the software, the platform, the products, etc. So I come in and sort of give them a photographer's perspective about how the platform works. God, my glasses are dirty. I probably should have cleaned them before I started, but it's too late now. I'm on a roll. I mean, I can't go back and recreate this kind of perfection. So I'm going to give you great 8 tips. I said great, I meant 8. Number 1, relax and have fun. I see so many people freaked out over bookmaking. It is remarkable. And if you're a stressed out, unhappy, accusational bookmaker, you're never going to make anything good. So if you're stressed out about making a book, just stop, take some time off, go back in the field, relax a little bit, because bookmaking in the middle of a global pandemic, in the middle of all kinds of weird things happening in our society and societies around the world, bookmaking should not be on the stress level list. Even if you're very serious about your bookmaking, if you're stressed and not having fun, you should stop, because it really shouldn't be that way. And I'm saying that after 10 years of working for Blurb and seeing people and hearing from tons of people and people who reach out to me and they are not happy, they're stressed. So just take a break. Trust me, everyone around you will be much happier. And by the way, just look at pop music. Look at how much of the pop music world we have to endure. That's traumatic. Bookmaking should not be. Okay, point number 2, forget everything you know about bookmaking. I studied photojournalism. I graduated in 92. I was trained what a photo book had to be. It had to be this giant coffee table monograph. It had to be as big as possible. It had to be as expensive as possible. You had to have some super serious character write the foreword. In my case, I did this project on religion in Italy, and the publisher said to me, "You have to get Gore Vidal to write your foreword." And I was like, Gore Vidal's not going to write my foreword. I'm never going to get near Gore Vidal. So forget everything you know, because all of those rules are out the window. If you want to do a traditionally published, offset, giant coffee table book with a publisher, great, knock yourself out. But that doesn't apply to every project. In fact, it doesn't apply to the vast majority of projects that we're doing. So in the interim, what else are you going to do? So forget everything, take chances, make mistakes, break some eggs, and be creative. That is your number 1 driving responsibility as a photographer, is to be creative. And that means breaking the rules. Point number 3, set realistic expectations. Oi, how many times over the years has a photographer reached out to me and said, or asked, how am I going to support myself, or how am I going to live off of my book sales? My follow-up questions are as follows. Have you ever made a book before? The overwhelming response, no. Do you know how to edit? No. Do you know how to sequence? No. Do you have an audience? No. Do you have a real mailing list of people that you can send? No. There's no infrastructure, and for some reason we're under this idea that we're going to live off our photography book sales. Now, I would love nothing more for you to be able to live off your photo book sales, but personally, and I've been around photography for 30 years, I do not know a single photographer worldwide in any genre that lives off of photo book sales. I don't. I know people who make money off of ebooks. I know people who make money off of their photo books, but they make a little bit of money. They don't come close to making their entire living off of photo books. And what this does is it puts unrealistic amount. Yeah, okay. I think the old Fuji X-T2s are starting to fail me. It's shutting off for no reason. I cannot tell from the front of the camera if it's shutting off. It just does. That stopped in the middle of one recording. I know the Fuji does recordings in about 5 minutes and 21 seconds, and then it goes on to a second film. It's not doing that. It's just dying, and it's dying at weird times. So God knows if this is going to work. There is no indicator light on the front of this camera now. I don't know what's happening. So maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. What I was saying was it puts undue pressure on photographers to try to make a living off of book sales. I think that is a wholly unrealistic expectation with very, very, very few exceptions. So don't worry about it. Have fun, make something, use the book as one arrow in your quiver. The arrow is a very important arrow, but it is one piece of being a photographer. It is not your whole idea or being of being a photographer. Okay, number 4 is set limits. I know we live in a world of unlimited data, unlimited everything all the time. I want it now. I don't want to wait. In the words of Homer Simpson when he got his microwave, what do you mean I have to wait 30 seconds? I want it now, that kind of thing. But limits, let me explain limits a little bit. The page limit count on a blurb book with standard paper is 440 pages. How many of you have work that demands 440 pages of a book? Let me answer that for you. 0. None of you do. I don't either. It's not to say there aren't reasons to make a 440-page book. I have made them simply to be able to see what a 440-page book looks like so that I know, so that if someone asks, I can say, you don't need to do that. But the other thing is, think about how daunting it would be to edit and sequence and page layout 440 pages. That is just amazing. And look at these monographs back here. When's the last time I sat and looked at a 400-page book? I don't remember. That's when. We don't have the attention span. Very, very rarely is anyone ever going to consume something of that size. So give yourself a set of parameters. Let's say that you want to do something new. You've never made a book before. Great. Magazine, premium paper, 40 pages. Done. Now look at what you've solved. You've solved your object, which is magazine, or your format, your aspect ratio, 8.5 by 11, your materials, premium paper, and your page count 40. Now all you have to do is design. Now you have to make great work, great edit, great sequence, and page design, and you're done. You have 40 pages to work with. Trust me, it works. All right. Number 5, think multiple formats. Any company that Blurb that allows you to do multiple formats means that if you're set on doing this big coffee table book, you can do it. You can do an 11 by 13 with Proline paper and hardcover and 100 pages or 200 pages or whatever you think you need to make. But most people are not going to engage with that volume of work and also that cost. But there's nothing stopping you from taking the same content and putting it in a different aspect ratio, different format with different materials that's much more affordable. So if you want to do your big book, why not do the big book, do 10 copies, change the cover image on each of the 10 so that each book is unique, sign them, number them, tip a print in, have a slipcase made, and sell those for $500, $750, or $1,000 a piece. And then have your smaller aspect ratio, your magazine, your trade book, that's affordable, that's for the public. That would be my suggestion. Number 6, collaborate as much as possible. It took me way too long to figure this out. I should have been collaborating from day one in my career. I was not. I did not learn until far too late in the game. All of the best projects I've done in the past decade have been collaborations with either other photographers, designers, artists, creatives, etc. They bring their expertise, and it always makes my work look better than it is. I highly encourage you to do this. There are a million ways to do it. Not only that, but you can share the budgets. You know, if you were to gather 10 photographers or 20 and everybody puts in $500 of their marketing budget, you could hire a designer and pay for an offset print run and end up with a really beautiful marketing piece and a promo piece, and also build a community of people. So collaborate. Number 7, there are a lot of softwares available to make books. You have Bookwrite, you have PDF Uploader, you have InDesign plugin, you've got Lightroom, you have all these ways of making a book. And you also have a million ways of getting mired in color management. Color management is one of the most boring topics I have ever found in my life. The average person on the street would rather stand in line at the DMV than hear about color management. You can mire yourself in that and forget to make a great book. So of all the photographers I've met in my life who've made books, 2 were mired in the color management and it ended up making good books. The other, however many thousand, ended up mired in color management and forgot to make a good book, an interesting book, good photographs, good edit, good sequence, because all they could think about was ICC profiles and color space and geeking out and putting loops on the pages. Customers don't do that. The civilians, the public, does not care whether you print it on Proline Pearl or Proline Uncoated. They're going to react to your book and your story, or they won't. And so if you're geeking out to that extent, it's probably not helping in the book process. Good color is important. Calibration, density, ICC profiles, etc. But once you've solved that equation, move on. Don't talk about it, don't think about it. Just fixate on making the best book you possibly can. Number 8, don't forget about MagCloud. MagCloud is a separate company under the Blurb umbrella. One is not better than the other. They are simply different. MagCloud is well worth your time investing in and exploring. I have tested every single product they make many times to figure out what I like and don't like, what works and what doesn't work for my needs. I highly suggest you do the same thing. It is well worth your time. And those two companies, Blurb and MagCloud, work really well together in terms of different formats supporting each other in the launch of a story or a project. Those are my 8 tips. I'm going to show you the pre-zone now. I may or may not do this in black and white. There's probably no reason to do the color. I can just tell you that some of this work was in color, but do you really need to see it in color? No. Yeah, anyway, I'll be back, and I appreciate it. All right, people, let's have a look at this presentation. I hope this helps. And before I proceed any further, just know that I had to put my cell phone in the other room. I think the radiation coming off my cell phone could probably cook a ham. I don't mean like a honey-baked ham, like a giant ham, but maybe the kind of ham you might buy at a gas station. You know, one of the hams that's maybe circulating on that little sort of clear-walled fryer thing that they use. I think a cell phone could power that as well. So before we go any further with this presentation, just know I'm not saying that what you're about to look at are good projects. What I'm saying is they're projects that I've done. Some are recent, some are from the distant past, but they're all projects that I created, utilized, learned from, and moved on. That's what the point I want to get across. Okay, in case you forgot who I am over the last 5 minutes, number one, that's not a good sign if you forgot who I am, but I am a creative evangelist, which should impress you, right? I mean, that sounds pretty good. Now, over the past 10 years with Blurb, I've made about 225 publications, and many of them are bad, right? And people are often shocked to hear me say that and admit doing something that isn't good. If I had to basically generalize my entire career, I would say upwards of 90% of everything I've ever made has been bad. I think that is consistent for every single person working in the creative space for the most part. I think, well, let me just narrow this to photographers in general. The vast majority of pictures we make are not going to work. So I don't look at a bad book as a bad thing. I look at a bad book as a learning experience and to try to pull from it what was positive, what was good. So I've been approached 3 times by traditional publishers to do book deals, and I've said no to all 3. 2 because they were terrible financial deals for me, and the third because it was a book I just did not want to make. This is a rare occurrence. Publishers know how desperately photographers want to do books, and oftentimes, they're in business. They know how to be strategic, and they will come, ask for a lot of money, and photographers will do it. I said no. I'm glad I said no. I'm not really built for the traditional publishing space. I'm much more built for the freedom of self-publishing. So the first item I want to talk about are what I call trade sketches. And if you know anything about Blurb, you'll know that there are multiple formats. You have photo books, magazines, trade books, and now we have wall art. But in terms of the publications, we have magazine, photo book, and trade. Trade books are global standardized sizes that are intended for distribution worldwide. These were never really intended for illustrated content, but illustrated content looks really good. And the 3 sizes that trade books come in are 5x8, 6x9, and 8x10. I use all 3. They're incredibly affordable and they look really good. Now, I call these trade sketches because each one of these represents a project that I have either worked on or am still working on. And I use these as portfolios. I use these as mailers. I use these as meet and greets, leave behinds, etc., etc. I don't make many of them much anymore because I don't work as a photographer anymore. I'm not trying to impress anybody with my photography. But these are little 5x8, 20-page sketchbooks or 24-page sketchbooks. They're super simple. This was a project called Vanishing Speed, which was about sort of man's relationship with nature. This was shot outside of LA on the dry lakes of El Mirage. And again, very, very simple. These are basically sketches / portfolios from the project. Now, imagine going into a client meeting or imagine meeting someone and they say, hey, what kind of work do you do? And instead of trying to give them some crazy description of what it is I'm trying to do, I just hand them a stack of these and I go, oh, this is the kind of work I do. And each one, so the one on the far left is about Morocco. The one in the second from left is about bloodless bullfighting in California. The third is called On Approach. And the fourth is about Man versus Nature project. Again, very, very simple layouts, simple designs and projects. I also do field guides. And this is a current project that I'm working on here in New Mexico, but I make field guides from every project I do. Here's the reality. Working as a documentary photographer now is far more difficult than it ever has been. People are suspicious. They think you're going to put things on Instagram. They think you're going to put it online. They think you're making money off of them. And when you tell them, look, I'm in the hole on this project, I'm never going to make money from this, it makes it even worse because they ask themselves and they ask you, why would you work on this if you're not going to make money? And it's a hard thing to explain. So both of these are from the New Mexico project. The one on the left is magazine format, premium, 8.5 by 11. Love it, one of my favorite formats. And the project is called A Simple Truth, or Una Pura Verdad in Spanish. And basically, it's an assortment of the work I've put together, but it gets better. So this is a line from Platoon. Let me explain something else. I don't sell these. I don't make money on these. I don't plan to sell these. This is just as a description for people in the field. So Smokey the Bear here took a shotgun blast to the head. I thought that was kind of representative of this project. But again, it's very simple layouts. I would call these more portfolio than anything else. You're hoping to hand this to someone when they ask you who you are and what you're doing and why you're there. This is evidence. This is proof of concept. It's proof of your talent. It proves you're not an Instagrammer. It proves you're not a looky-loo. I also put in a personal history. That's me as a kid in Wyoming. Spent part of my childhood in Tie Siding, Wyoming, and that is partly responsible for why I live where I do today and why I'm working on this project. That's my father and I in Wyoming in the mid-'70s, and this is important because people, when they pick up this, when I hand this to them and say, this is why I'm here and what I'm doing, they will read this entire thing. And so it's a very important part of being in the field. And then I hit them with basically a variety of the images that I've made so far on the project. Nothing special, nothing fancy, but it gives them an idea of what is happening. I also have a smaller version, which is a 6x9 trade book. Again, some of the same ingredients, the same story, but different layouts and design and different photographs. And again, I just hand this over and I don't have to do a whole lot of explaining because they can take a look and either say, I get it or I don't get it. And I can tell you with about 99.9% of the time, they are intrigued. They are impressed by the fact that I am not an Instagrammer and I am not there to make some quick picture and then try to gain something from them. Magic City. Okay, let's talk about, earlier when I gave you the tips, I talked about collaboration. This is another 5x8 trade book. Again, these are very inexpensive, very affordable, very accessible. Everyone who's listening to this right now has access to all this same stuff. So Andrew Kaufman is a Miami-based photographer. He and I have been friends for a long time. He busts my chops every day. I bust his chops every day. That's part of life, of being a photographer. And so I went to Miami. He's been there forever. We decided to work on a project together. I shot Polaroids. He shot color film. When we were done with the work, he said, what do you want to do with it? And I said, I would love to send this to Chloe Ferris, the designer in Sydney, and see if she would design something for us. And we did. And so she designed a book. We did a volume prior to this called Magic City 1. This is Magic City 2. And it is a book that is designed to be folded. So all the internal pages, which looks like this, internal pages, you'll see each spread has like a vertical line through the middle. That's actually not a line. That is actually the page folded over. So each fold represents a different design and a different image. So underneath each of these folds are Polaroids, are different designs, are different spreads, etc. So from one spread, you get that look, that look, that look, and this look. This is the only book in 11 million books that have come through Blurb. This is the only one ever that I've seen designed to be folded. This is a completely and utterly unique concept. This book was nominated for Photo Book of the Year in Australia, and it was up against a lot of like big publisher books and things. As far as I know, the judges did not fold the pages, which is kind of, frustrating. But again, it's sort of atypical experience of what you'd have with a book. But the only reason this book exists, the reason why it is so good is Chloe Ferris, because her design skills are so far beyond anything that Andrew and I would have ever been able to come to on our own. That is the power of collaboration. And again, when you're folding the pages, that's how they look. And there's a whole other side to this story that I'll tell at some point about purposely making this book not available for sale publicly, and the fact that drove people crazy that they couldn't get it. I had rare book collectors and all kinds of people after me to get copies, and I just kept saying, nope, Nope, sorry, can't have it. Magazines. I love this. I've talked about it a million times over. This is the first real production magazine I ever made. This is from 2007, and this is my original copy. That's why it's so completely beat up. I've been carrying it around since then. This was done through MagCloud. If I was doing this today, I would use Blurb. I could use MagCloud, but I'm just so used to the Blurb platform now. The magazines are identical, so it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. When I made this in 2007, I didn't know if I could make a magazine, and I didn't know if I could sell a magazine. So my goal was to make it and sell 100 copies and then turn it off. And so I made this, and it's a very simple thing. The title is MLife. That's based on the Leica M camera, which I shot for 25 years. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to make a magazine, why not make it about something where I know there's an audience that would be intrigued and want it, which is the Leica users, and they're crazy and they're rabid, and I knew they would maybe want to get a look at this. As you can see, it's so beat up, it's completely fallen apart. That's me in Morocco with my trusty M4 or M6. There's a couple of essays in here, but it's primarily 7 different projects shot with the Leica M. It's very, very, very basic. And by the way, those pages, the page on the right, that's a dark, dark, dark blue. That is not black, and that was purposeful. I think it looks incredible. It's hard to see in this image, but anyway, these are all basic stuff. I'll go back here. That's El Mirage Dry Lake. That's Glamis Dunes. That's in Fez, Morocco. This is the political convention in LA in 2000. I got my butt kicked here by the authorities, if you will. Punched, clubbed, kicked, gassed, you name it. Yeah, it was a party. And again, from the same event. But again, look at this, super basic. These layouts, this is not about me saying I'm skilled as a page designer. This is about me saying, hey, this is work that I think is worthy of being on the page. Maybe you'll have an interest in it. So the funny part is I turned this thing on, and it sold out very quickly. I sold those 100 copies, and I turned it off. And again, the second that people couldn't get it, they wanted it 100 times more. This was 2007. I still get requests to buy this magazine today, which is kind of fun. So this led me to making another magazine, which is a magazine series called Essay. And this is basically a tribute to the original Life magazine. Life magazine was very important in me becoming a photographer. It was very influential. And so these are 40-page magazines that are published in 2 sizes at the same time. Magazine on the left, trade book on the right. And I've done 4 issues so far. I'm working on issue 5 right now. Problem is the project, I can't get to the project I'm using for issue 5, so it's going to be delayed a little bit. But these are very basic. The reason I made these was to show you how easy it was to do this and how affordable and how strategic. If you are a photographer and you are not making your own magazine, you are missing out. I don't know how else to put it, especially if you're a reportage or doc shooter. Why on earth would you not make your own magazine? There is simply no magazine left in the world that will publish your work the way that you want it to be published. They don't exist anymore. So why not make a single copy of a magazine that shows your project the way that you envisioned it when you started? So each of mine are, again, 40 pages, exact same content, 2 different formats, 2 different styles. One is not better than the other. They're just different. This is called Notes from California. I lived there for a long time. So and by the way, that image was handheld with a 6x7 camera. Handheld, and I got lightning. Do you know how incredibly rare that is? That's not even skill on my part. That's 100% luck. And I didn't die in the lightning strike. Two positives of the day. Okay, super simple. Fuji 6x9 camera. Oh, I miss this baby. That's at the backstretch at Del Mar. This is in Paradise, California before it burned. I did a project on all the towns in America called Paradise. I only got through 5 of them and realized my work was not good enough and I need to start over. This is about people who play war during war. This was during the Afghan war, and I went out and shot paintball. Got hit many, many times. It hurts. That's all I can verify for you is it hurts. Project on the oldest adult entertainment star working. Spent 3 months with him. Bloodless bullfighting, California. Again, super simple. I did not make this to prove to you I'm a good photographer. I made this to prove to you that you should be doing this yourself. And I cannot stress that enough. Do not buy these magazines of mine. Don't even think about buying them. Just make your own. That's the key. It's really fun. All right, personal. This gets overlooked because I can't put myself in this category anymore, but a lot of photographers are just waiting to be known, right? We want to be famous. We want our work to be known. We want followers, subscriptions. We want fame. We want money, all this stuff that it's not really talked about a whole lot, but that's really the rub. That's what people are after. And making a personal book often gets overlooked because we're trying to be famous, right? And you're not going to get famous often from a personal book. As you can see, this one is also very beat up. I've been carrying it around forever. So the ranch I grew up on as a kid in Wyoming, in 2017, the total eclipse passed over the ranch that I grew up on. So that was in the totality zone. And so I traveled with my sister back to Wyoming, and I did this project called Glimpse, a semi-autobiographical work of fiction. It goes all the way back to my great-grandparents. This was an image from 1907. They were born in 1878. And look how lively they are and excited they look to be being photographed. And so now you know exactly why I became a photographer. So anyway, this traces back through not only my lineage, but also these are the notebooks that I kept as a kid when they would drop me off with a rifle and a bottle of water in the middle of nowhere and say, okay, you've got to like detail what's happening with the herd or whatever. So everyone gets a good laugh out of these. There's also a lot of copy in this book. I wrote stories about my father, about how we ended up in Wyoming, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of like short stories in here, like 5,000 words a piece. Lots of photography as well. That's my mom. She taught me how to fly fish when I was in elementary school. So having her in here with fishing a little bit was pretty important. That's the house that I lived in. We have more antelope than people kind of thing. So again, and cattle dogs, cow dogs, border collies are a big part of life out there. So anyway, I just made some pics of all that stuff. And then we hit the eclipse. And it's a lot of like copy mixed with photography, et cetera, et cetera. But these books, this is one of the most important books I've ever made. And you're never going to see it. No one's ever going to buy it. There's a couple of copies in existence. But how many of you out there have archives of family, whether it's photo albums, still photos, trays of slides, paperwork, journals, etc., that are just going to disappear if you don't sort of collect them, scan them, copy them, and put them into printed form? Definitely worth doing. All right, this is the latest project that I've worked on, which sadly was back in spring of 2019. So I rarely pick up a camera these days. I just don't have time to do it. But when I do, and I would go out with what I would call intention. Like this was the last time I went into the field with intention. I am going to Albania, and I'm going to Albania to make photographs. That had not happened in years. And I haven't done it since then, and that's been, we're over a year later. So sadly, I don't get to press the button much anymore. But before I went to Albania, I did some research, as I always do, and tried to learn about the history of the country and come up with a technique that I thought that would represent what I was trying to get across. And Albania, for those of you who don't know, was isolated for 40 years, completely cut off from the outside world under both Russian and Chinese occupation. And so once it opened up, the country has been in transition since then, which makes a lot of sense, right? All of a sudden you're like, hey, the doors are open and now you have these personal freedoms. And so the technique that I settled on was double exposures. And I'd never done this before, so I had to do a bit of on-the-ground learning once I got in country, but it worked out pretty well. So this is called declassificaur, which is declassified in Albanian. They had a lot of surveillance on the population, etc. Everything's double exposures for the most part. And again, this is an autobiographical work of fiction. I did a lot of writing as well. I'm actually writing in my journal as I made this photograph, believe it or not. And here we start with the work itself. So a lot of the copy that you see were overheard conversations. They were overheard quotes. This says the battle for Albania is in our mind. So imagine being isolated for 40 years and then one day someone gets up and says, hey, you're not isolated anymore. You can do whatever you want. It's kind of a daunting psychological experiment. That is Hoxha, the dictator, on the right. There's still statues of him sort of in decay around the country. Lots of double exposures. And then I sort of took this from a fashion magazine, which is every 10 pages, there's an oversized page of copy that came from a journal entry. And most of the journal entries were just overheard conversation. Also note on the far right-hand side of the right page, you have a vertical piece of copy, and that is gives you the date and the exact time of when I made that photograph, and it also has the title as well. That's just a little design element to fill in sort of white space on the edge of the page, but I like it, and it's easy to do, but it adds a lot to the story, I think, or it adds a lot to the design. And then about every 10 pages, I would also try to put in a single image that I thought was strong enough to stand on its own. And this is what I was not sure I could do when I went to Albania, because photography is like working out. Like if you don't work out for years, you're gonna be flabby and you're not gonna be strong. I didn't know if I could make decent pictures anymore. Back to the doubles, sports like alpinism and swimming were strictly controlled. If you were strong and you were good and you were professional, you could escape Albania. This is Lake Shkodra. Double exposure, again, endless pages of copy, standalone images that I thought were strong enough to stand on their own, more double exposures, Lake Shkodra. This is a mass grave in Kosovo. And again, this is what I would call just a portfolio of the work. I'm not trying to tell you that I know everything about Albania. I've only been there once. I have nowhere scratched the surface. I went with a photographer named Elena Dorfman out of Los Angeles, who is Albanian descent, and she's been going in and out of the country for a long, long time and knows way more about about it than I ever will. So I'm just trying to put together something respectable and interesting from my time in country. And second to last is my journal. I've talked about this a lot before. This is a 6x9 trade book. I love the blurb journals because I can mix and match what kind of paper types I want, and I can load them up with my own work. In this particular case, this is a story from Uruguay, and I've included things like my press credential. I've included a bunch of copy from my journal at the time, and then I also start adding in images from the trip with grid pages and lined pages and blank pages, etc. The journal is the book that I use the most. It's incredibly important to me, especially when I'm in the field making work. And this is I'm going to skip through this really quickly because I don't want to give you too much detail, but these are what the pages sort of look like now when I'm writing in it. Nothing is sacred. I add all kinds of things to it. AG23, I've talked about this many times before. Again, another use of trade book, but this time in offset form, 2,000 copies, 6x9 softcover with a matte cover. I've done a lot of talk and a lot of features and a lot of films about this with more on the way. This is a great use of trade. And when I talk about collaboration, there are so many of you sitting out there listening to this right now that could be doing something similar if you just got organized and said, look, we're going to pool our resources and we're going to do this. This is Andrew Kaufman's work from Panama. We have Charlene Winfred's work from Iraq, Megan Wong's work from Sydney, Afterlife of Plastic. This is just another example of a strategic use of trade books and also being able to just really operate as your own ecosystem as a creative. I don't need to go to a publisher. I don't need to go to anyone else. I can do all of these projects on my own or with a small group of friends, and we can put this stuff out into the world. And the customers don't care where it was printed, how it was printed, who came from. They just look and they're going to react to it or they're not. That's Frank Jackson, by the way, in the upper right. He's also in the first issue. And the bottom right is Melanie McWhorter and Michael Lundgren. And then to the left is Zoe Sadikirski, who is the designer of AG23. And if you don't know about her, wow, you want to see what a real designer looks like, and just someone who's overall remarkably creative, interesting, nice, and pioneering in what she's doing with the printed page. So I hope that was helpful, and that's it for now. Did I break my record for the longest YouTube film in history? I might have on this one. I hope that was worthwhile and helpful. Again, I'm not saying these are good projects. All I'm saying is these are projects that I finished, that I utilized, and that I learned from. So of all the terrible publications I've made in my life, as I mentioned before, I learned from all of them. Even if it was a single spread or a design technique or a pairing of images or etc., that to me is just the cost of doing business as a photographer. You have to put your work into print and to make decisions and also make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes and do this. So I hope that was helpful. I'm trying to squeeze out a second film today as well, potentially a third, which is just not a good way of making films, but that's my life at the moment. So I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll talk soon.